As the drums of war echoed across the globe in 1939, a young Australian woman named Vivian Bullwinkel found herself drawn to a higher calling. With a quiet determination, she joined the Australian Army Nursing Service, ready to serve her country in its time of need. Her early days were filled with the rigorous training required of military nurses, learning to care for the wounded under pressure, a skill that would soon be tested in ways she could never have imagined. Her commitment was unwavering, driven by a profound sense of duty and compassion for those who would suffer in the unfolding global conflict. Little did she know the extraordinary trials that lay ahead, trials that would forge her into a symbol of resilience and courage against the darkest backdrops of human conflict. The initial excitement and apprehension of joining the war effort quickly gave way to the harsh realities of military life. But Vivian faced each challenge with a steady resolve, preparing herself for the unknown dangers that lurked on the horizon. Far from the familiar shores of her home, Vivian's journey into the heart of the conflict began with her deployment to Singapore in 1941. The vibrant, bustling city, a strategic British stronghold in Southeast Asia, was initially a place of relative calm, a stark contrast to the distant battlefields of Europe. However, this peace was a fragile illusion. As Japanese forces swept rapidly through Malaya, the air in Singapore grew thick with tension and apprehension. The nurses, including Vivian, worked tirelessly, preparing for the inevitable influx of casualties. Hospitals became scenes of frantic activity, reinforcing defenses and stocking supplies, while the distant rumble of artillery fire grew steadily louder, a chilling harbinger of the approaching storm. The daily routines of caring for patients were increasingly punctuated by news of retreating Allied forces and the growing realization that Singapore's impregnability was a myth, pushing everyone to the brink of exhaustion and fear. By early 1942, the situation in Singapore had become catastrophic. The rapid Japanese advance led to the city's imminent fall, a devastating blow to Allied morale. With Japanese forces closing in, an urgent evacuation order was issued for non-essential personnel, including many of the nurses. It was a desperate scramble to escape, a race against time as the enemy tightened its grip on the island. Vivian and her fellow nurses were among those directed to board ships, hoping to reach the safety of Australia. The scene at the docks was one of chaos and despair, with civilians and military personnel alike vying for a place on the last few vessels. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and fear, as the once proud fortress city crumbled under relentless assault. Amidst the pandemonium, Vivian remained stoic, her training kicking in, guiding her through the disarray, even as the future seemed incredibly uncertain. Vivian Bullwinkel, along with 64 other Australian nurses and many wounded soldiers and civilians, boarded the SS Vyner Brooke, a small coastal freighter. The ship, already overcrowded and ill-equipped for a dangerous wartime voyage, represented their last hope of escape. As they sailed away from the burning shores of Singapore, a temporary wave of relief washed over them, quickly replaced by the gnawing anxiety of the open sea. The journey was fraught with peril, as Japanese naval and air forces dominated the waters of the South China Sea. Every shadow, every distant sound fueled their apprehension. The nurses, despite their own fears, continued to care for the wounded, creating a makeshift hospital on the cramped deck, demonstrating extraordinary resilience and dedication even as their own lives hung by a thread. The constant threat of enemy attack created an atmosphere of profound unease, a grim countdown to an unknown fate. Tragically, the Vyner Brooke's journey was cut short. On February 14, 1942, off the coast of Sumatra, the ship was attacked by Japanese aircraft. Bombs rained down, turning the vessel into a blazing inferno. Chaos erupted as explosions ripped through the ship, and the roar of engines mingled with the desperate cries of passengers. Vivian, displaying incredible presence of mind, helped guide as many as she could to the lifeboats and rafts, or simply urged them to jump into the shark-infested waters. The scene was one of utter devastation and horror. As the ship rapidly succumbed to the relentless assault, she herself plunged into the oil-slicked sea, surrounded by wreckage and the screams of the dying, a profound moment of individual survival. Against an overwhelming military assault, the warmth of the tropical waters offered little comfort against the terror of the attack and the sheer scale of the tragedy unfolding around her. After hours clinging to debris in the treacherous waters, battling exhaustion and the constant threat of sharks, Vivian and a small group of survivors managed to swim to the shores of Bangka Island. The island, though land, offered little immediate solace. They were disoriented, injured, and deeply traumatized by the sinking. The tropical jungle, dense and unforgiving, loomed before them, promising a different kind of danger. The survivors consisted of a mix of nurses, soldiers, and civilians, all equally lost and vulnerable. Their immediate concern shifted from the sea to finding fresh water and avoiding discovery by the Japanese forces who were known to be patrolling the island. The relief of reaching land was quickly overshadowed by the daunting prospect of what awaited them in the unknown wilderness. Soldiers departed. Vivian, badly wounded and emotionally shattered, dragged herself into the dense jungle, alone and without supplies. She faced the terrifying prospect of survival. In a hostile environment, the jungle was a labyrinth of thick vegetation, oppressive heat, and unknown dangers, venomous creatures, impenetrable thorns, and the constant threat of discovery. Her wounds, though not immediately fatal, were a constant source of pain and potential infection. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, heightened her fear of the Japanese returning. She navigated by instinct, seeking shelter, clean water, and desperately trying to keep her strength up. Her isolation was absolute, a profound sense of being the last one left, forcing her to rely solely on her own resilience and unwavering will to live. Against all odds, after days of solitary struggle, Vivian stumbled upon another survivor from the Vyner Brooke, a British soldier named Private Kingsley. Kingsley was also wounded but alive. Their reunion in the vastness of the jungle was a moment of profound relief and renewed hope. They quickly formed a survival pact, understanding that their chances were far greater together. They shared what little food and water they could find, nursed each other's wounds, and provided vital emotional support in the face of overwhelming despair. The simple act of having another human presence, another voice, mitigated the crushing weight of their predicament, allowing them to pool their resources and strategize for their next move. However uncertain that might be, this unexpected companionship became a vital lifeline in their desperate situation. For the next 12 days, Vivian and Private Kingsley evaded Japanese patrols, constantly moving deeper into the unforgiving jungle. They battled hunger, thirst, and the relentless tropical diseases that threatened to overwhelm their already weakened bodies. Mosquitoes were a constant torment, and the humid climate exacerbated their wounds. The psychological toll was immense, as they lived in perpetual fear of discovery, every step a calculated risk. They found sustenance in whatever edible plants they could identify, always on the lookout for fresh water, and fashioned crude shelters from leaves to protect themselves from the elements. Their conversations were sparse, often focused on survival, but the silent companionship offered a profound sense of shared purpose, a quiet resolve not to give up, no matter the odds. Despite their extraordinary efforts, their luck eventually ran out. Weakened by starvation and illness, and having exhausted all avenues of escape, Vivian and Private Kingsley were ultimately discovered by a Japanese patrol. The moment of capture was one of resignation rather than surprise, a grim inevitability after weeks of relentless struggle. They were taken prisoner, marking the end of their desperate fight for freedom and the beginning of another, equally harrowing ordeal. The jungle, which had been their sanctuary, now became a silent witness to their loss of liberty. Stripped of their meager belongings, they faced an uncertain future in the hands of their captors, knowing all too well the brutal reputation of the Imperial Japanese Army. Vivian was separated from Private Kingsley and transported to the Japanese internment camp at Montauk. Also on Bangka Island, the conditions in the camp were appalling: overcrowding, lack of sanitation, rampant disease, and starvation were the daily realities. Vivian, still recovering from her gunshot wound and the trauma of the massacre, was plunged into a new hell. She witnessed firsthand the systematic cruelty and neglect inflicted upon prisoners of war. Despite the horrifying circumstances, her training as a nurse kicked in, and she began to care for her fellow internees. offering comfort and what little medical aid she could provide with virtually no supplies. Her presence, a beacon of compassion in the darkness, became a source of quiet strength for many. Vivian Bullwinkel would endure 3.5 years of brutal captivity. In various Japanese prison camps, each day was a battle for survival, not just against starvation and disease, but against the dehumanizing conditions and the constant psychological pressure she witnessed. Countless deaths, including many of her nursing colleagues who succumbed to the harsh treatment. Yet, through it all, she held on to a flicker of hope, an unwavering belief that she would one day be free and able to tell the story of what had happened on Bangka Island. Her inner strength became legendary among the other prisoners, a testament to the indomitable spirit of the human will in the face of unimaginable adversity. She quietly resolved to be a voice for those who could no longer speak. In August 1945, with the surrender of Japan, liberation finally came. The emaciated and weakened prisoners, including Vivian, were freed. The joy of freedom was profound, yet it was tempered by the immense physical and psychological scars of captivity. For Vivian, the weight of being the sole survivor of the Bangka Island Massacre weighed heavily upon her. She was not just a survivor, she was a witness, carrying the responsibility of telling the world what she had endured and what had happened to her friends. Her return to Australia was a hero's welcome, but behind the public accolades lay the private anguish of her experience and the solemn duty to honor the memory of the fallen. Vivian Bullwinkel returned to Australia, not seeking quiet retirement, but dedicating her life to nursing and to honoring the memory of her fallen comrades. She testified at war crimes trials, ensuring that the atrocities of Bangka Island were not forgotten. She became a prominent figure in the Australian nursing community, serving as matron of Fairfield Hospital and later as president of the Royal College of Nursing, Australia. Her survival story became a powerful symbol of resilience, courage, and the unwavering dedication of military nurses. Vivian Bullwinkel's legacy is not just one of incredible personal survival, but of a tireless commitment to justice and remembrance, ensuring that the sacrifices of the nurses who perished on Bangka Island would never be in vain, leaving an indelible mark on Australian history.